Part A of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, being broadcast under the banner of Baby Angel Geronimo. Baby Angel Geronimo is the witness round the clock to all the bad things being done by the evil ones in the United Kingdom. Baby Angel Geronimo has been in the United Kingdom since 2017, having been born and lovingly raised in New Zealand by a woman called Leonie Walker. Baby Angel Geronimo is the world's bestest witness and bestest and most adorable Baby Angel Geronimo. Baby Angel Geronimo personifies blessing in contrast with the evilness that he witnesses. Evilness called a woman called Christine Evilness Middlemiss, based in the United Kingdom, DEFRA. Evilness personified by Boris the Liar Johnson. The evilness personified by George Injustice Eustace. And any number of evilnesses deployed by the evil ones at the DEFRA under the banner of protecting the environment in the United Kingdom, which is the opposite of what they do. So the Baby Angel Geronimo is the main theme, and under the narrative of Baby Angel Geronimo, everything else that we cover, comment on, refer to, mention, cite, and update is included in the witness being borne by the Baby Angel Geronimo. As the Holy Quran says in Surah Al-Isra, truth has arrived and falsehood perished. Indeed, falsehood is doomed to perish. Ja al-haqqu zahaq al-batil. Inna al-batila kana zahuqa. Each day, each revelation of the latest lies of the criminals holding various positions, making decisions. Each perpetration of lies and evil denials and evil untruths is being recorded by God. And to transfer that into the human society, human beings, every human being has got a permanent angel on each of the shoulders, recording on the left hand shoulder the bad things that the individual does, and on the right hand shoulder is the good things that the individual does. These are the key evidence that will be presented on the day of judgment to judge the particular individual, every single one. And we illustrate by referring to Baby Angel Geronimo's own witnessing. That will be additional evidence of the bad things being done by the criminals who targeted baby angel Geronimo for harassment, anxiety, distress, uncertainty. And as she is his mum in England, baby angel Geronimo's mum, Helen MacDonald, has been targeted for harassment, demonization, disbelief. And the targeting has been done by criminals truth, anti-justice, criminality, aimed at hurting, harming, defaming, demonizing baby angel Geronimo. We notice that the RSPCA and other so-called animal welfare charities have remained, to our knowledge, absolutely silent about the DEFRA criminality and attacks targeting baby angel Geronimo. Probably the reason is that the RSPCA itself has been a key tool, instrument for the mass murders of innocent animals in England. From the very start of the foundation of the RSPCA, and as time passes and more evidence appears, the baby angel Geronimo's initial assertion that he was never carrying the bovine tuberculosis, that he was never infected with anything, that he was subjected to evil process whereby a false reading of the test of his biological entity was organized by the evilnesses and the evilnesses that followed DEFRA by abusing their positions in the High Court in England. So the legitimacy is linked to the existence of a process called the High Court. But the High Court is completely a scam, an absolutely untruthful, unjust, evil weapon to be used against the innocent and the most healthy, which is what baby angel Geronimo is and has been. We shall be continuing on the baby angel Geronimo's empirical witnessing, and in context we shall be adding each particular highlight as and when we progress. Now, in today's so-called Fleet Street papers, the dirty digger Rupert Murdoch owned Sunday Times has got a comment column, byline to the son of a Pakistani father and a white mother, Matthew Saeed, whose physical architecture and pigmentation make him look exactly like a white individual. So, wherever he was or has been in England, could not have been anything to do with his physical appearance that made any teacher or any observer of him refer to him as a Paki. So, why is this liar writing this thing? When I was at school, a teacher could call me the P word. We have come so far. Now, this criminal is, of course, in denial, and as part of the propaganda operation, he is doing the same thing as Trevor Terrible P. Lips does, as Kemi Bad Enoch does, as this new edition called Tomiwa Owlade, who is being added to the lineup of very black-skinned criminals doing very white, anti-black, in a way that would make the racist, imperialist Thomas Babington Macaulay very, very vindicated indeed. All these criminals are given license by the racist media, and there is no right to reply to these criminals, liars, from people who are on the ground experiencing the exact opposite of what these criminals are peddling. Now, in the comment, the Sarah Ditum has got a heading: seizing every knife is impossible. We have to persuade boys they don't need them. Now, this is October. And from the days of the Greater London Council, which funded this thing based in South London called ASA project, which then started the Black History Month in October every year. So this Black History Month is being, within quotes, celebrated by fantasizing about black achievements, hiding the fact this 15-year-old child, Eliane Andam, was murdered in Croydon last week. Although the murderer has not been ethnically, racially identified as far as I can see. It is without a doubt a black African, quote, heritage. Can you imagine? Heritage perpetrator. Now, Sarah Ditum, a white bourgeois, cultured woman, is clueless. She has no idea what is going on. When heavily black skinned criminals commit murders of very black skinned targets like Elian and Dam, why does it happen? And the truth is that this happens because the parents, the entirety of the African heritage people, wrongly called the Caribbean community, because Caribbean is an artificial description. These are people from Africa. The root included Caribbean through the slavery, exploitation, but actually, ethnically, historically, these people are African. So, why do African perpetrators murder African targets? We don't want to talk about other targets because dealing with the African targets is a very demanding question that will take a lot of time and energy and resource to explain why do they murder black skinned targets. My answer is that because they are taught, whether it's formal or not, these murderers are taught from the very beginning of their kind of existence, biological existence. They are taught to hate, and they're taught to hate self. So the hatred of themselves is the main guiding line, force, power that they carry as individuals, whether they're aged 10 years or 12 years, or so the schooling, whether it is formally schooled or not, the schooling that takes place of the children born to black parents or black mothers, let's say, is a murderous schooling, a hateful schooling. It has got absolutely no positive impact. For example, I have experienced similar things on buses. I was traveling from Brixton to a destination to the south of Brixton last time, some years ago. And as buses are overcrowded, I found myself looking at the person standing opposite me. It was a black woman who would be aged about 30 or so. I wasn't looking at her as if I was looking at her. I had been staring at her or something. I wasn't. I don't do that. Now, I wonder, I got off at the next stop because from experiences before, I knew that she would get nastier and there would be a row developing for no reason. So I got off at the next bus stop as fast as I could in order to avoid that, because in bus it was impossible to expect anyone to intervene if this nasty looking black skinned individual, African origin, started to behave worse than she had been already. In the Brixton Underground station, for example, I have got off the train trying to go upstairs, leaving the myself walking against space. So the and I so so why that has been the case, I have no idea, except to say that these individuals who have behaved in an identical way at separate, unconnected locations and times and dates must have been doing that as a result of the hatred that they had been raised with. Hatred of a number of things, including anyone who looks like me, not African black, but politically I am black, but I'm not black in the physical sense of looking like an African pigmentation. So it's a distinction. So the difference and the distinction in pigmentation must be one of the triggers that the upbringing has inst- instilled in these young persons. I can see that. That is why when they murder the black targets like this one murdered this Elian and Dam, they were not looking at a pigmentation that were raised to respect. They were attacking a pigmentation that they were raised to hate. Now that covers not only the formal schooling, etc., but it covers a deeper self and society and relationship with other people and the responsibility to respect and allow the space to the other individuals. I don't see any evidence, and I've been interacting with people of various ethnic backgrounds and identities. I mean, since I came to the United Kingdom more than 50 years ago, I don't see any evidence of any discourse taking place among the elders in the African black skinned community towards the African black skinned children about responsibility, about the sanctity of respecting people. So many things have happened, so many incidents have happened that have in common between them, among them, this lack of sanctity, lack of respect for the other. And the lack of respect and lack of sanctity for the other actually differs depending on the particular pigmentation of the targets of the hatred. On a bus going east from Aldgate East towards Commercial Road to East India Road, one day I was on a bus standing, and there were three girls, black with African pigmentation. They would be aged about, let's say, 20 on average. And I was trying to stand up while also trying to read some kind of magazine. And I noticed suddenly that there was one of them looking with extreme hatred towards me. I had no idea why she was doing that because I never ever had met her or whatever. Now, it was just a split second decision by her friend or companion who literally, physically whisked her away from the bus. Now, if her friend hadn't done that, this hateful individual would have behaved worse than she had begun when I noticed what she was doing. Now, this was some years before the attack on a Bangladeshi Muslim woman wearing a hijab in the Bethnal Green Road, who was attacked by a black African skinned black woman, viciously attacked in Bethnal Green Road, and was abused. Now, these are incidents that are not kind of rare. These are very frequent incidents. On the London transport system, tube system, and other networks, significant numbers of people are employed with Africans' black skin, pigmentation, and when they interact with people of my pigmentation, if you like, they are hostile. Not every single one, but most of them. Very hostile, very uncooperative, and very, very defiant, generally, disrespectful. Now, what is to be done about the duties of somebody like these people employed by the Transport for London? There is no evidence anywhere in the networks or in the vicinities that note any notice is being made or notice is being taken of this kind of hostility. When Barney Grant, who was involved in an attack, in a prosecution based on his attacking an Asian man, most possibly an Indian, in South London with his stick, because Barney Grant had attacked this Asian Indian man at an incident in South London. By the time he got to the court as part of the prosecution, he made a completely false claim. He said that he was being politically persecuted and prosecuted. That's not the case. Many people witnessed Barney Grant's violent behavior. And Barney Grant was particularly violent towards Asian ones. So you have the absolute evil behavior by the likes of Kemi Bad Enoch and Tomiwa Owlade and Trevor Terrible Phillips and the murderer of Elian Andam. These people are dominating the spaces that are given under the general, very sophisticated of giving diversity in government and in the media, and when it comes to the likes of the judiciary, positions in the judiciary. And there is no opposite answer or response or alternative to these one sided, hateful narrative and outlook. When I went to the Inner London Education Authority after spending months in trying to spend a day observing the day spent by one of the ethnicity linked post holders in the Inner London Education Authority. An African pigmentational black person, Trevor Carter. He had arranged prior to the meeting with more than one individual, or maybe just one individual, sitting in the next room to interrupt the meeting that I was supposedly having with him by making about 50 or so phone calls. Now, if 50 phone calls, or even 40, or even 30, or even 20 phone calls arrive during a meeting that is supposed to be face-to-face meeting, supposed to last not more than an hour, that completely fucks up the whole thing. There cannot be a meeting, even with one interrupting interrupting telephone calls. So every time a call came, rationality demanded that I let Trevor Carter attend to it. And by attending to it, I would expect him to say to whoever that he was in a meeting for another hour or 2 hours, and he should not be contacted on the phone at all. Far from it. Trevor Carter instead went on to explain that he was very busy, and these calls meant that he was wanted by his colleagues in other parts of the Inner London Education Authority. Now, that could not be more untruthful and dishonest. Trevor Carter was not a leading member of the staff of the Inner London Education Authority whatsoever. In the rankings, Trevor Carter would be like eighth in a 10 tiered, let's say, structure. He would be like the eighth tier at the bottom. So there was that he could be in demand by any number of subordinates. He didn't have any number of subordinates. He was at the level of the subordinates himself. The reason why Trevor Carter was employed by the Inner London Education Authority at all was because he was a willing mental slave colluder. That was his main role. Now, my investigative technique has always been to give even the worst offending wrongdoer the opportunity to tell the truth. So, although what I am saying now, and I have said many times since this happened, that I knew what he was doing, I didn't tell him that he had already arranged for the interruptions to happen. I knew that he thought he was fooling me. That is one possibility. The other possibility is that he was totally intellectually and ethically, morally, empirically, evidentially, absolutely unable to answer the questions that he knew I would ask him. So the way of diversion is an escape from what he thought was a trap that he tried to avoid for months by evading my efforts to hold the meeting with him. Trevor Carter was obviously trying to escape from the trap, but he was doomed to be in the trap for as long as I was there. It's like I have suffered similar experiences with, like, the most notorious or well known kind of West Indian individual called Joe Hunt. Now, by the time I met him, it was more than 10 years since he had hit the news by publishing a report about the police nigger hunting in the Notting Hill area. I met Joe Hunt in the 1970s when he had already been retired. But he had been given a completely, intentionally, mentally enslaving court job, which was a total by all the races in control of various positions in Tower Hamlets Council and centrally in the United Kingdom. The predecessor of the Commission for Racial equality, because the Commission for Racial Equality was launched in April 1977. And I'm talking about the beginning of the decade of the 70s. So it wasn't the Commission for Racial Equality, but its predecessor organization that was controlling the outlet that Joe Hunt was in post as an employee for, allegedly for Tower Hamlets. And the outlet was called, the outfit that was used to give him the job, the money, etc., was called CCTH, Council of Citizens of Tower Hamlets. Now, in the more than a decade of my contacts with Joe Hunt, or contact meaning my interactions with him, I never heard Joe Hunt even mention the word citizens, let alone holding a council of citizens meeting in that way. And whatever his historic kind of contextual role as the observer of police nigger hunt in Notting Hill, by the time I found Joe Hunt in Tower Hamlets, I found him in a state of complete mental, intellectual, ethical, moral degeneration. Like Trevor Carter at the Inner London Education Authority, I found Joe Hunt struggling and fighting and being desperate to escape any meeting that he had with me. To him, any encounter, any meeting, any interaction with me threatened him, not because of me physically threatening him, but of my representing the questions that he knew he didn't want to answer or even acknowledge. I'll come back to Joe Hunt after I refer to the conference, weekend conference that was held in 1981 in Birmingham, UK-wide conference of mainly African pigmentational black people and a smaller number of Asian ones, connected with the various ethnicity linked and state funded outfits. Now, I was the main speaker at the event, and I was also the main speaker at the weekend training session, training to cover the racism of the BBC and the British media and what the opponents of racism could and should do in order to get rid of the racism of the BBC and so on. That was in December, I think, 1981. And on the night before the first weekend session, training session, I sat down on an upstairs room with the following. Trevor Carter, not Trevor Carter, sorry, Alex Pascal, Robert Gavenda, and a Senegalese called Mukhtar. And the idea behind the sitting there was to brief them. Because I was going to lead the training session, this was to help them take a preview of what I was expecting to happen during the actual session. And I noticed that the more I went into the actual explanation, the more kind of disengaged these individuals became. And Alex Pascal and Mokhtar actually threatened to jump out of the window of the room because they thought that what I was doing was to put them under pressure, intellectual pressure on all kinds of issues. And they would rather jump out of the window than go through the pressure that they perceived I was putting them through. Essentially, this was not anything to do with what I was objectively doing. To me, it was a very light hearted kind of session. But to them, it became a heavy handed session, which reminded me of the one particular appearance on the BBC Radio London program where Alex Pascal presented the Radio London Black Londoners program. And I appeared along with the Croydon based and now deceased Jean Bernard. Now, during the program, which lasted, let's say, less than an hour, I think, I noticed that Alex Pascal and Gwendoline Jean Bernard were able to communicate with one another, whereas I couldn't follow what they were saying to each other. Now, there is no way that I could fail to understand what they were saying if they wanted me to understand what they were saying. The idea was that they became engaged in a diversion so that they would frustrate me from getting involved in the conversation, and then they would deny the listeners any investigatory questioning by me of either of them. Well, it doesn't end there. There are literally, over the last 50 plus years, there have been hundreds of similar events, interactions, and common among all these interactions has been the hostility, the lack of cooperation, etc. So when they say that they are starting this month, this week, the observation of Operation Black History Month, the Black History Month operation, they do not recognize any of the reality that actually dominates the lives of black people generally. I mean, So the idea that a Black History Month is being observed is celebrated by the likes of The Guardian and similar. They don't connect. The Guardian doesn't connect the reality of the violent culture that dominates the day to day existence of the African pigmented black community. And they most certainly don't recognize the hostility towards Asian people by the African pigmentational black ones on either education or any other topic or issue or event. This the only justification for having any connection with the two or between the two kind of phrases, Black History Month, is to stage something so the people who stage it or are involved in the staging of it can show that they're doing something, and so therefore they can get their equivalent of the allowances or grants or money from their supposed kind of sponsors, which is why the artificiality of the contents of the Black History Month happens. I'm going to end this particular introduction at 52 minutes at 8:46 hours GMT on Sunday, the 1st of October 2023.